Good evening, and welcome to the very first edition of FAA Safety Briefing Live. FAA Safety Briefing Live is designed to cover the latest issue of FAA Safety Briefing magazine, which is the March and April issue, which was the magazine on flying companions. And I'd like to welcome and introduce my co-host, Susan Parson. Susan,
Hi.
how are you this evening?
I'm great, and it's great to be here. Glad that we were able to get through the technical difficulties and join you all. I am the editor of the FAA Safety Briefing magazine. It's one of my favorite things to do because I get paid to write about my favorite subject and to think about it. So I'm thrilled that we can do this. Our purpose in bringing you this information is to give you a little bit of the story behind the story, to introduce the magazine for those who may not be familiar with it, and to give you an opportunity to earn wings credit through this course and through the magazine. But most important, we're trying to do everything that we can to enhance safety. Paul, you want to talk about wings credit and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. If you go to the program page, you can see the visual that will direct you. You can click on that, and that will take you to the location where you can earn wings credit. And in order to get through a lot of the material in the quiz, you will need to have a look at the copy of the magazine. And on our next visual, we show you the link to the print copy, or if you already have a copy, you need to work through some of the articles, and that will guide you through the answers in order to get your wings credit. We're very delighted tonight to have some very special guests, which we'll be introducing in just a moment. But Susan, for now, for those of you that may not be familiar, with the FAA Safety Briefing magazine, perhaps you could, take us through the behind the scenes about its production and some of the content.
Sure, I'd be glad to. First of all, we are trying very hard to distinguish ourselves from other magazines that the community puts out. We're not trying to be like everybody else. So we have set ourselves up to be the safety policy voice for non-commercial GA. That's our mission statement. You'll see it on the magazine. And those are our goals you see on the screen: to raise awareness of the resources that the FAA offers for free, to explain safety and regulatory issues, because we are able to do that in a way that other publications may not be able to do. But most of all, to encourage continued training and education in aviation safety, because that's what we all care the most about. We have a number of departments, regular departments. We have a focus or a theme for each issue, and the reason we do that is that we want to try to give as much information as we can on specific issues, like we did for basic med, compliance philosophy, aeromedical, and now the issue that we're going to talk about tonight. And you'll notice there in yellow, condition inspection. That's a new column that is debuting in the March-April issue, and it's to talk about some of the specific medical conditions that pilots need to be aware of. So we're very glad to have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about what we do.
It's great. Thanks, Susan. And that brings us to, what's in this edition. It's the March and April edition, and it's called the Flying Companion issue. And Susan, this is not the first time there's been a Flying Companion issue. This is the second issue of that. Why is it so important?
Well, it is the second issue. The first one we did in July and August of 2014 was very popular. I've taught a lot of classes for flying companions or pinch hitter. I think what it really comes down to is that we all are very much aware that our friends, neighbors, family especially, are very, very important to us in flying. We want to take family and friends with us. We want them to be comfortable in the airplane, because to the extent that your family and friends are comfortable, you get to go flying more, or at least that's certainly my experience, and I think it's probably the experience of our guests tonight as well. So these are some of the articles we'll be talking about a little bit, and I think that you will enjoy them all, not only as a pilot, but we're hoping that you can hand this issue to your flying companions, whoever they may be, and have them learn something about flying as well, and be more comfortable in the airplane, which is the most important part.
Well, it's one of the pleasures of being a pilot, and that is we can share our love and our passion, for aviation with our family and our friends. but it's important that our flying companions, know the environment that they're in, that they're at ease, and that they can be part of the flying process itself. So it's a great topic for tonight. And with that, I'd like to introduce some of our guests. First and foremost, we have John and Martha King. John and Martha King are certainly friends and ambassadors, to the industry, and you're so well known, and all of us appreciate everything that the two of you have done.
Well, hello, folks. In case there's any confusion about this, I'm John King.
And I'm Martha King. Paul, it's a delight to be with you. This is a very important topic, and we're really enthusiastic that you're covering it.
Well, we're excited about it as well. And Susan, we have some FAA guests that perhaps you could introduce.
I'll be delighted to. Starting with Kieran O'Farrell and Fred Kaiser. They are a couple. I don't think it means anything that they're in separate places tonight, other than the fact that Kieran had to travel. I don't think they had a fight in the airplane, but we'll ask them about that a little bit later. And we also have Brad Ziegler, who did an absolutely fantastic article that, if you haven't read it, you'll love it. Mates, Munchkins, and Mutts. And these are some of Brad's pictures. I stole them from his Facebook page. That's where I got those, Brad. And Brad, for those of you who don't know, you may not know the man, but you know some of his work because he was very instrumental in basic med. So we're thrilled to have him as well.
Thank you, Susan. I'm glad to be here.
And we'll be bringing all of our guests back separately to ask for their contributions to how they fit into the companions issue. Before we do that, though, the structure of the magazine, Susan, the content has been organized along the structure of aviate, navigate, communicate, and mitigate. And I mean, every pilot knows that aviate, navigate, and communicate are the priorities for pilots in order to how to manage the flight and how to manage risk. You've added mitigate to this as well. And what's the importance of mitigate? Is it the last in the sequence? Is it umbrella, or is it something else?
It's the umbrella, but it's also the thread. If you'll notice here, one of the reasons we did this particular slide is to show you that while we do address the aviate, navigate, and communicate, mitigate is where the content is the heaviest in this issue of the magazine, and actually in several of the ones that we've done recently using this. What we're trying to do is get pilots accustomed to thinking about mitigation as part of what you do before, during, and actually after the flight as well, because that's your opportunity to look at what happened and how to move, how to learn from what you may not have done perfectly this time. So mitigate is both an umbrella and a thread, and that is the lion's share of the content of this issue.
Yeah, well, it's great. And I also happen to know that mitigate in terms of risk management is an essential part of the new airman certification standards that you've had quite a bit of work with.
Absolutely. And we're very glad to introduce that and to hopefully get people thinking about it in the same way that you do aviate, navigate, and communicate as critical things that you have to do when you're a pilot.
Sure. So let's move on and expand on that just a little bit. I had a look at the content in the magazine about aviate, navigate, and communicate, and you made a comment in there about bringing your A game. And what do you mean by that?
Well, that's the title of one of the articles, Bring Your A Game. And the reason I wrote that one, so I called it that because when I hear aviate, and another word for it is fly the airplane, but I had a hard time figuring out what exactly does that mean. And finally, it kind of dawned on me that it's when you control your attitude, your airspeed, and your altitude, that is what aviating is all about. So that is essentially, so that turned into the A game. And if you read the article, you'll see I like to play with words. That's what I do. I had a good time with it, and I hope you will too.
So, issue about flying companions, why is it important to talk about aviate, navigate, and communicate from that viewpoint?
Well, first of all, it's about, we're trying to demystify, but when I've taught flying companion courses, a lot of times what people are concerned about is what happens if something happens to the pilot and I have to take over. So by providing a little bit of information about the Aviate, the Navigate, and in that article, Flight of the Navigator, we talk a lot about the apps that are available now, and communicate, trying to demystify the language we speak in aviation. That's all about trying to help the flying companions get a greater comfort factor, and also provide a little bit of information to those who want to be helpful. And we'll talk about how your flying companions really can be helpful to you if they're willing. So it's about educating, demystifying, that sort of thing.
Well, and I'm sure that as pilots, we've all had that experience of having a passenger friend with us, and we want to put them at ease. And at the same time, if they can contribute to the overall flight and help us, that's kind of what this is about, isn't it?
I believe in putting everybody to work, and that includes all the instruments. John is laughing. John King is laughing because he knows I do that. Yeah, I always say that no instrument in the cockpit should get a free ride, and actually, people in the cockpit shouldn't either.
That's great. Well, that provides a mechanism now for us to move on to Brad Ziegler. And as you said, he wrote a very nice article called Mates, Munkins, and Mutts. Brad, welcome. Thank you so much for the article and being part of this program. Can you give us, just a little bit of background about how you got motivated to write this piece? Brad?
Brad appears to be frozen at the moment. I think that may be he may be logging back in. So how about if we go ahead?
Let's move on to John and Martha, and then we'll come back and pick up with Brad.
Okay.
Well, what we're talking about here is the flying companions and getting along together in an airplane. And Martha and I have been flying in an airplane for a long, long time. We started flying together in 1969. But the problem is we haven't always gotten along all that well when we're flying together.
We've had some interesting times, particularly when we were flying our Cessna 340, teaching 2-day ground schools. And sometimes we'd land back at our home airport and we'd drive home in just this stony silence. And you could practically see the steam coming out of our ears. The problem was that we're basically even in hours. We are even in ratings. We're both flight instructors. And it's very easy for the person in the right seat to slip into the role of a flight instructor, even when they haven't been invited to do so. And that doesn't make it run really smoothly.
So it was double trouble because the person flying the aircraft didn't appreciate the unsolicited flight instruction. And so they were annoyed at this kind of unsolicited flight instruction and being interfered with in their authority.
Or micromanaged.
But and the person who was providing the unsolicited instruction was very upset because they were being ignored. And after all, they're flight instructors. Why aren't you paying attention to me? I'm a flight instructor. So we would each be annoyed with the other, no matter who was the pilot flying and who was the pilot supposedly instructing. And at one time we were at a dinner party with a friend of ours, Bob Wagstaff, who was the husband of Patty Wagstaff. And I was telling Bob how difficult Martha can be, providing this unsolicited instruction when I didn't want it. And then she would say that I was equally difficult. And then we went back and forth. And Bob says, hey, folks, hold it. I can fix that problem for you. And not only that, I can fix it with one word. And I said, oh, you're not going to fix this problem with just one word. This has been going on for a long time. And we're deeply frustrated with each other over it. So he says, well, I can fix it. And I said, okay, what's the word? He said, well, the word is captain.
And the whole idea behind captain is that the person in the right seat, by prefacing any remark they make with the word captain, is acknowledging the authority of the captain, of the person flying, but they're also calling upon the captain's responsibility as captain to take input from other crew members, or their flying companion if it's not a two-pilot aircraft, which our 340, of course, was not.
Now, as you might guess, there were some rules that went along with this. And one of those rules is that with I'm trying to give Martha information, I say Captain, and I can give her information. For instance, I can say to her, Captain, you're below glide path and sink rate is 1,000 feet a minute. That's information. What I cannot do is give her my opinion and say, Martha, you're below the glide path, you're way too damn low. And so I cannot do that. That's my opinion. So I have to treat her with civility and respect. I have to be assertive with respect. And
on the other hand, as captain, I have to exercise authority with participation. In other words, I have to not only accept, I have to solicit the participation of whoever's in the right seat with me, because we're flying as a team, and it takes both. And I'm still behaving, exercising authority as pilot in command, but encouraging the participation of other people in the aircraft in order to make it a better flight.
You know, almost everyone who flies with us is a pilot, and our airplane is hooked up with headsets at every seat, because it'd be cruel and unusual punishment to make them ride along and not know what's going on. So
I don't know. It might be cruel and unusual to make them.
What's that?
It might be cruel and unusual to make them listen to you fight.
Absolutely, it would. So we treat each other very, very formally. We don't give opinions. We give information. We treat each other with enormous respect, and it's been a huge change, and we get great satisfaction out of flying together.
It sounds like what you've done is you've professionalized it without personalizing it. Is that correct?
Exactly. We found that either friends or employees that are in the airplane with us don't feel particularly comfortable if John and I end up in a fight in the cockpit. And so we work very hard, as you said, Paul, to depersonalize everything, to use non-argumentative, non-stressful language, non-accusatory language. And, you know, the whole key to this all is respect, showing each other respect. And as you know from your airline flying and training, just being very professional and very standardized.
Well, and what we tell our crews is that we really only want two things from them. We want them to respect our procedures and respect each other.
Yeah,
exactly.
Now, well, we've finally learned to do that.
Well, and
so
you all
have a sophisticated method of determining who's going to be captain?
Oh, we have a very simple method. We trade left seat on every leg.
Perfect.
No throwing the dice, no elaborate, you know, what day of the month is it or whatever. We just swap seats every leg.
But I want to make it clear. She's only a little bit better pilot than I am.
You used to say I was a lot better.
But who's the most difficult to get along with? I missed that part.
I think we're going to pass on that, Paul.
All right. That's good CRM. So, John and Martha, Susan, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to say thank you to the two of you. I used you in one of my articles about the Pilot Squared article is what I called it. Because by listening to your story about Captain, you taught me about how to get along with really any other pilot in the airplane. And I almost came to grief one time by, well, I didn't have a pleasant flight one time when I was with somebody who was trying to be an instructor. And ever since then, I've tried to follow your advice. So I really, you've probably saved a lot of friendships without realizing it.
One of the things that we've found over the years is if the person in the right seat is a pilot and not someone that you fly with regularly where you're used to each other, if you possibly can, it's important to give them a job to do, whether it's handling the radios or something like that, because it's just in the nature of pilots that they want to be involved, they want to do something. And if you don't put them on the track you want them on, you're going to see hands flying in the cockpit, flipping switches, turning knobs, and you aren't going to be able to keep up with what they're doing. So we work very hard when we're flying with a pilot who we don't regularly fly with, to give them jobs that will let them participate, because participation is what makes the whole thing fun.
The key to it is a briefing before you go.
Of course. Of course. Well, thank you both so much. It's a pleasure to share this with you. Susan, our next guest are your FAA friends and colleagues. Can you lead us off, please?
Fred, yes, don't you love this picture, the old-timey airplane? That's another that I appropriated from your Facebook page. I'm sure you recognize it. So Fred and Kieran have a long time friends of mine, colleagues as well. You've probably seen them both at various events like Sun and Fun and Air Venture. You'll see them for sure at Sun and Fun in a couple of weeks. But Kieran and Fred have some interesting stories about flying together too, and maybe a little bit of a different take on who is the pilot in command when they're flying together. So Kieran, I'm going to start with you because you're my buddy Thelma and Louise. Tell us how you do that.
Well, thank you, Louise. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here. Big fans of the magazine, and I love following the Kings. I mean, we are not worthy. That's all we can say. Following the Kings. We're not quite as formal about the captain thing, but I think we're going to adopt that. I like it a lot. I think it could benefit us. Kind of the method we've gone about it is we always decide who's going to be pilot in command before we get in the airplane. And we've kind of done that because we fly a lot of different kinds of airplanes, and our expertise is in the different kind of airplanes. So I have more experience in the seaplanes. So I'm the pilot in command for those. Fred has more experience in like the ski planes and the tail draggers. So he's pilot in command in those. And when it comes to your conventional gear, we're kind of equal there. So we split it up, but it's always fun. But that is a decision made way in advance.
Fred, do you have a different take on that?
Well, let's face it. My first flight with her was in a 737-200 sim in Vancouver, Canada, and she was the captain and I was her first officer. And after that flight, I realized that, I think I'm going to try to make her the captain of my life. You think about skill transfer. When you've been flying bush aircraft, Beavers and whatnot, and you transfer those skill sets to a jet, they're a little bit different. Well, there's a lot of difference between the two aircraft, but she did it with impeccable skill. And we've learned over our years of flying that we don't want to make a mistake. And I often tell her on the flight deck is, don't let me do something today that'll kill us. We're always cognizant of that. Principally, we've lost a lot of friends up in Alaska. And it's just one of those deals that, you plan the flight before you leave. And if you've done the due diligence, if you do encounter a problem in the flight, you're going to have a change of plans and not necessarily an emergency, because you've planned it out, you've thought it out. And, she is a consummate Czech individual. And her mind is sharp. She catches me probably 90% of the time. Well, like John and Martha, was saying earlier, they know us. They know our tendencies, and they watch what we do and how we act, and she keeps me out of trouble. But we have learned a lot in our flying career about what not to do. And I'll let Karen tell the other side of this story about what not to do.
Well, Karen, before you do that, do you have some recollections of some really good flights that you and Fred have done together, and maybe the opposite, and what have you learned from it?
I do. And there's two flights that stick out in my mind, and I'll start with the one that didn't turn out so well for us. And this is when we're working for the FAA, and we had taken a float plane out, and we wanted to go out to the outer coast of Alaska, out by Juneau towards Elfin Cove and Pelican. And we started late, and it was getting late coming back, and the weather was definitely settling in all around us. And so we made a decision. I'm like, this we can't go back to Elfin Cove. That door's shut. Remember, we're day VFR on float plane, and it's probably, I don't know, I think it was around 7:30 at night. And while going to Juneau, that had also the fog had settled in behind us. So there's a little cove called Hobbit Hole, and we popped into Hobbit Hole and made the decision we'll stay here till night. And so we tied up the plane to a log, and spent the night in the airplane thinking about that was really smart. Well, aviation will humble you in a minute, because in the morning I woke up and the sun was glistening through the trees. It was a beautiful day. The fog was breaking up. It was early. I was like, perfect. Let's get out. Let's get this thing going. And well, the runway had gone away because the tide went out. And now we have a good 4 hours of quality time, as everybody we know is flying over us, calling down, asking us if we need a tide book. So that was embarrassing on a number of levels. Certainly the fact that we were late to work, that day too. And so, yeah, that one didn't really turn out well. We talked about this for a long, long time after that, and how we got to that point, where we were just, there we were. So yeah, that one taught us a lot of humility, a lot. So that was the one that didn't turn out well at all, and it's still embarrassing when I think about it. But hey, lessons learned.
Well, we've all had those lessons, haven't we?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and a good flight?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, one of your best flights together?
Well, without a doubt, the best flight I've ever had with her, we took our goddaughter out to a cabin on Seymour Canal. And this was her first flight, really in a bush plane, going out into a remote cabin, that kind of stuff. So it was a big treat for her. The thing that's odd about a lot of the remote cabins is these folks have buried large concrete pads. And so that's pretty much what we tie the aircraft up. It's offshore. We have a pulley system to bring them in and bring them out. That way the folks don't get chewed up on the gravel. So that was one of the things we did. That was one of the things you sit on the beach and marvel about. But you take people out, you show them the wilderness, you show them the whales, you show them the animals. Literally every single day that we were there was just an eye-opening experience for this young gal. The weather cooperated. It was beautiful. I think Karen flew out. I flew back. It was, without a doubt, probably the most memorable flight of my life, and it'll always stick with me, because that was actually the last time we saw her alive. She died a few months later, and it was a meaningful event to us that we still talk about today.
And Karen, is there a singular piece of advice that you have for flying companions like yourselves?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Never take an argument you have on the ground into the air. We one Saturday we really wanted to go out and visit some friends at a Forest Service cabin. They had left the day before, and we couldn't go out that day, so we were going out the following day. And we got up to the plane, and there was an incoming front. And the rule in Alaska is never push an incoming front. And we're getting the plane ready, and I'm looking, and the waves and the winds, popping up, and it's getting worse. And I'm like, I don't like this. This doesn't look good. And Fred's like, oh, we're good. We got some time. We'll get there before it hits. And I'm like, no, I don't like it, and so we stood there and we had this heated discussion about it for a minute. And then I think I said to him, we read about people like us every day in our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And we stopped and we kind of saw that we were becoming that person that wanted to get somewhere. And we kind of just stopped and laughed for a minute about it. And that's when we came up with our next rule, which was the most conservative opinion wins the day. Now, I did hold over the fact to Fred that I was a meteorologist and that, the weather decision, that was a little more expertise, but that has served us well. Whoever had the more conservative decision, that's the one we're going with. I've never read accidents reports of people that regretted, as Susan was saying, mitigating something or being more conservative, but I know there's a lot of them that wish that they were.
Sure. Well, congratulations to both of you for your flying career and your adventures, and it sounds like you have a lot of fun doing it.
We do. Thanks. It's great to be here.
That's great. So we see we have Brad Ziegler back with us. Hi, Brad.
Hi, sorry about that. I had to squawk 7600 for a few minutes there, but made it back on okay here.
That's perfect. So where we left off was your article about flying with mates, munchkins, and mutts was an article all about mitigation and flying companions. And to start off, what was the motivation for your article?
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to say, one, I'm a teeny bit jealous of John and Martha and Fred and Karen, because you both get to fly with your spouse. But I have to say, though, that my wife, who is a non-pilot, I don't have to split flight time with her. So I get to log all the flight time. Perfect. But to just give you an idea of the motivation for writing this article, if you look at the picture there, you're probably wondering, why the heck is this guy flying with a half-naked toddler sitting in the front seat? Well, the fact is we're sitting on the ground there in St. John, Newfoundland, in St. John, New Brunswick, and this particular flight was part of my motivation for wanting to write this article. We were flying up to Nova Scotia from Washington, D.C. My wife was in the back seat with my little guy. I was sitting up front. We were happy, just cruising along at 8,000 feet. And, I turned around and my wife says, Will doesn't look like he's doing so well back there. And next thing I know, he's revisiting his lunch. And I think, oh, wow. So, it was time to make a unplanned landing at a unplanned airport. And, I was able to get on the ground and work through all the details of clearing customs at Canada at an airport that I did not originally plan to land at. But it made me think, wow, I was not ready for that. And so, and sitting down and working through what are the things I would share with others, that flight was a part of my motivation for doing that. And, it's really been an exciting lesson of, how to fly with your family. And these are the things that they don't teach you when you're working on your private pilot certificate is, how to deal with a puking toddler in the back seat. So that was really exciting. And, to be honest, not all the things in that article are mine. I asked my wife, Michelle, I said, hey, do you have any thoughts? And, and she had several different things that she wanted to share, which I brought through in that article as well.
Oh, that's great. Other things in your article, Brad, you sort of mentioned about pre-flight considerations, and what do you do different that might be good guidance for pilots and their non-pilot friends and family, especially when you're talking about pre-flight?
Sure. Well, two of my most frequent passengers are my toddler, Will, and Baxter, my Jack Russell Terrier. And anyone who knows a Jack Russell Terrier knows that they are wild dogs. And so one of the things I learned early on was if you want to have a pre-flight inspection of your aircraft with as few distractions as possible, you need to relocate your little ones. So, one of the things my wife and I worked out is when we travel anywhere, I leave for the airport first with the luggage and my checklist, and she shows up about 45 minutes later, and that gives me enough time to top off the fuel, or I say top off the appropriate amount of fuel depending on our weight and balance, load up all the weight, and figure out whether or not I want to bring my wife's anvil collection with us today or not, and really get a chance to get a good walk around the airplane without having her or my little guy following me around and possibly distracting me. And when he gets older, of course, we'll have an opportunity to do that together. But the great thing about doing it that way is that I get a chance to just spend a moment, sort of get in the zone and brief myself for the flight and kind of walk myself through it, visualize what we're going to be doing, get a good opportunity to brief the weather without all the distractions that you might have when you have passengers standing there watching you. And I will say there's another advantage for my wife, because she feels like a rock star when she pulls up, parks the car, hops out, jumps in, everything's loaded, and off we go. Now, Martha, I bet John doesn't do that for you, does he?
It gets pretty close. He handles the outside of the airplane, and I handle the inside on our pre-flights.
Yeah, we split up everything.
That's great. Brad, you also brought up a couple of other concepts in your article. Two of them were the ultimate safety pilot, and the other was you can't take all that.
Sure.
So I think I know what you mean by that, but can you just spend a moment or two on that, please?
Sure. Well, Ultimate Safety Pilot, that is an excellent article. It's written by FAA's flight surgeon, Dr. Mike Berry, and it really brings home a really great point about how a passenger can act as a safety pilot. And we all know of a safety pilot from perhaps a 91.109 reference to the person who sits next to you when you're using a view limiting device and acts as your eyes when you're under the hood flying by instruments. Now, I look at another definition of safety pilot as perhaps a person who's there, who's able to give a second opinion on who you are. And my wife, even though she's sitting in the back seat, she is a great safety pilot because she knows me better than I know myself sometimes. She knows when I'm not feeling so great. She knows when I'm stressed. And she's one of those folks who is not afraid to speak up and say, hey, are you okay to make this flight? And that is what's key to having a supportive spouse, is someone who is okay with helping you make that no-go decision and being very understanding when no-go is the right thing. And Karen and Fred were talking about the person with the most conservative opinion wins. And I think that's a great statement, because that's how it is for us. And sometimes she may see something that I don't see, even from a non-pilot's perspective of certain limitations. And I'll share an example that took place just this weekend, actually. My wife and I were flying down to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. It's a wonderful hour and 45-minute flight in our Cessna 182, and a absolutely disastrous 7-hour drive in Washington, D.C. traffic on a Friday afternoon. But, in talking about the flight and looking at the circumstances of leaving on a Friday afternoon after a meeting, and knowing that we both have to get to a meeting first thing Monday morning with a nor'easter blowing in over the weekend, potentially on Sunday, we knew that there was a possibility of having some issues flying back. And so my wife has flown with me long enough to know that, having the option of being able to drive and not express, it's okay to be disappointed, but not not to the degree of, she knows not to pressure me into making the flight, and she trusts my decision making. So in that situation, it was really great because it was a collaborative decision with both her and I, and that's really what a great non-flying spouse is someone who's willing to, work with you and help make a good and safe decision.
And the other item you talked about is kind of a mitigation strategy is about you can't take all that with you. I heard you reference something about anvil collections and things like that. So that's an important thing to brief our passengers, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, one of the things that my wife and I, discussed early on, and when we first bought this airplane, started making long trips, is it's not quite like loading up the Ford Explorer with everything and just going off wherever.
Although most people that have a 182 will tell you that it is. So. Well,
I'm not going to lie, it can carry a lot of weight, and that's a fantastic thing. But every flight, we're doing a weight and balance and making sure that we have enough that we've effectively worked out the weight and balance so that the plane is good to go, and that we fuel it appropriately. And that's part of my pre-flight plan, is to look at what we have and make those appropriate decisions.
Susan, if I could go back to you for just a moment. You have a mnemonic called safety, which is about how we brief our passenger companions. What is that? And expand on that just a bit for us.
As we all know, one of the things, regardless of who's in the airplane, we have to brief our passengers on certain things, starting with seat belts. I personally try to make sure that my passengers in general aviation airplanes pay more attention than most people do on airliners, sitting there not looking at the briefing. But one of the things that I suggest in the magazine for the benefit of people is safety, because this covers, you can easily remember the word, but it covers all the things that you need to talk about. So we actually have it in my flying club's airplane. We have little cards that say safety, and it's on our checklist that this is something that it's obviously not required, but you can use this to brief your passengers on what they need to do. The traffic and talking piece, obviously those pieces are all important in your questions, but the traffic and talking leads to our next piece, because one of the things that we can ask pilots or non-pilots, our flying companions, to do is we can ask them to do something affirmative, which is to help look out for traffic. And moving on to the next slide, we have a piece on that particular thing, plane spotting. But the other one is talking. I don't know how you do it with the toddler, Brad, or with the mutts that you take along, your Jack Russell Terrier, but certainly you want to let your passengers know when it is appropriate to talk. I always tell people, if you see an airplane, I want to know about it. But if it's something that can wait, and while we are trying to get out of the busiest part of the traffic pattern, then hold on to that. And so plane spotting is something that I think passengers can do to be helpful, but it also it helps give them something to do too. Hopefully we're not flying in this, but I love the picture.
Yeah, and Susan, there's articles about you've called them When the Wind Blows and a Weather Wingman. Tell us about that.
Well, some of it is about, When the Wind Blows, we call that the mini weather wiki for non-pilots, because when I first started flying, people who were watching me said, oh gosh, Susan will get interested in anything. Kieran, I'm sorry, I wasn't a meteorologist, but she'll get interested in anything if you can connect it to flying. And there's a fair amount of truth to that. But I was trying to figure out what, how to learn what we're looking for. So this is a little bit of a primer, demystification for non-pilots on what it is that pilots are looking for when we pour over the weather. And Brad, when you're talking about, or Kieran, we're talking about weather that means that we can't fly. It's a little bit of an education for people on what are the conditions that you really can't safely take a general aviation airplane in. Weather Wingman is an article that talks about pilot reports or PIREPs. That one's more aimed for pilots themselves. And as we make the point in this article that we tend to think about PIREPs when something is bad, if you find ice or turbulence or things like that. But it's also awfully important to report to other pilots when you don't find those things, because sometimes the forecast can sound pretty awful. And if somebody has gone ahead of you and says, hey, there's not ice out here after all, that gives you a lot of useful information as well. So again, a lot of the things in this issue, we're aiming content at both non-pilot flying companions, but also at pilots who can, use that to help make your passengers more comfortable.
Excellent. So we want to extend a special thank you to all of our guests for helping us through this part of the program. And if we can get the man behind the scenes to advance us to the slide on where to find us, we'll have a little bit more information. FAA Safety Briefing, the March and April issue, has a lot of content. We've been able to share some of it with you, but of course there's a great deal more. And what are some of the other places where, Susan, our readers can learn more about the articles?
Well, this is the webpage. There's also a link on the side of the screen, and you can subscribe to a print copy. There will be lots of copies at Sun and Fun if you're planning to go. If you go to a safety seminar, Fast Team Safety Seminar, you're likely to find copies there. But if you want to do what I do and read it on the iPad, you can download for free in a variety of electronic formats, carry it around with you and read it as you wish. You can follow us on Twitter. We do have Adobe Spark articles that are pretty easy bite-sized pieces. And just to make the point again, we certainly didn't try to make the quiz hard or difficult because, gosh, I take those quizzes, so believe me, I didn't make it difficult. But I did try to make it so that you need to maybe have a copy of the magazine handy electronically or otherwise when you take the quiz.
Thanks, Susan. So I know that you're always in production mode working on the next issues and that you're already preparing some articles. Tell us about the next couple of issues.
Oh, we are. I'm partial to flying white horses. I have a car that has the Pegasus license plate on it. But we're calling our May-June issue, which we're wrapping up production on right now, the Pegasus issue, because we're going to look at research that benefits general aviation and that's focused on general aviation safety. The FAA goes into partnership with the community, academics, industry for some of this research, and we're focusing on one partnership in particular, which is called the Partnership to Enhance General Aviation Safety, Accessibility, and Sustainability. See, I said that, John. Are you impressed? I can see your face. So that is it. The acronym is Pegasus, so we're calling it the Pegasus issue. And we're not just talking about the projects and what they can do for you, but we are weaving in the Pegasus mythology. So we hope you'll enjoy that.
Absolutely. And the next issue?
Oh, the next one is really going to be fun. I stole this idea from you, and I'll let you explain why.
So Casablanca, of course, is a classic movie. It's got everything you could possibly want in a movie. It's got some quotes that have endured into modern day times. It's got airplanes, and it's got a classic love story. So, what more could you want? And where this actually came from, the issue is going to be called Round Up the Usual Suspects, which is a famous quote from the movie. Where this actually came from was I was teaching a class to our flight instructor staff about what they were seeing online and what they were seeing in the simulator. And one of our instructors stood up and he said, well, we see the usual suspects, some problems with stalls, some problems with single engine work, and problems with non-precision approaches. And I thought, oh, usual suspects. And I actually began to think that if the usual suspects keep being the usual suspects, we need to do a better job of training. And so that's going to be the focus of the July-August issue. And Susan, I think you could tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, well, when we do our planning meetings far out in advance, and one of the magazine staff, and by the way, I hope that you'll please look at the bios of the rest of the magazine team on the side. Tom Hoffman is our managing editor. Jennifer Karen is one of our writer editors. James Williams and Paul Cianciolo, who's the social media lead. So when you see us on Twitter and Facebook, a lot of that is Paul's work. But anyway, I was one of the staff, I won't say which one, tried to say, well, we need to do an issue on a specific subject. And I kind of rolled my eyes. No, that's just, we always write about that. I don't want to do it again. And then another topic came up, and I suddenly, because Paul had told me his usual suspect story, all of a sudden it just hit me that we could do an issue about the usual suspects. However, and this goes to something else we tried to do with this magazine, I absolutely will not tolerate stodgy boring. We're not going to do that. So what we're trying to do is to make useful information interesting and entertaining. And we have a lot of great ideas for our Casablanca issue, which will be the Oshkosh issue. I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing it, and I hope you'll have a lot of fun reading it as well.
It sounds.
And I'm proposing
great.
a fedora. I'm gonna wear. I'm thinking about being the silhouette on the cover with one of those Ingrid Bergman hats.
I'll look for that.
I so see it.
All right.
I gotta find it.
So just a quick reminder about the Wings credit that's available for this program. There's the visual about, click on that link. And you would need a copy of the magazine to help work your way through some of the answers. That actually wraps up the first edition of FAA Safety Briefing Live. I want to once again extend my very special thanks to John and Martha King, to Karen O'Farrell, to Freddie Kaiser, and to Brad Ziegler, and of course my co-host and colleague Susan Parson. Susan?
Thank you again. I'll echo that. I also want to say thanks to John Typin, Fast Team TV. John has done a really terrific job tonight in working us through the technical difficulties and making this broadcast possible. So I'm sure we've all learned a lot. And when you see us in May, just like we do with every flight, we want to take the lessons that we learn in this occasion and carry them through next time. So that's what we're going to do. Thank you for joining us. Hope you get Wings credit. Hope you enjoy the magazine, and good night from me.
We'll see you in May.
So we go.